Ah, hello there, fellow pirates. I saw that there was a new update on Sea of Thieves coming out Tuesday a few days ago, and I was excited to see what came out. And it turns out, if you come over here, there was a lot of updates, but one of the main ones is two weapons here. The double barrel pistol and the throwing knife. While I've seen a lot of people talk about them, and, a few things that they can do, I haven't seen people really going over many of the use cases for them. Instead, they prefer to go over the use cases for things like this. And I also haven't seen many people really using these, as I most commonly see people running Blunder Sniper still. So, as I have played with these for quite a hot minute here, I figured I would show you guys a few things on how you can use said weapons here. Now the first one is the double barrel pistol, as this one is very easy to get used to really quickly. Now, the first thing that I found about this weapon is that you should almost never, like if you're fighting a boarder for example, or you're boarding and trying to fight people, you should almost never use the charge attack. This is because you can't run while using it, or it will reset the charge, and so then you just wasted that opportunity. You can only walk, which makes you a little bit more open. And because the other problem is, at range, both of the shots, while they do stick close together, if you don't hit exactly the player with two, you might as well just shoot both individually and hope to hit both. Which kind of gets rid of the purpose. So instead, rather than shooting two at the same time, if somebody was, say, right there, you would shoot once, they would most likely be hit or be scared and jump somewhere, and then you would just shoot them again. It makes it quite significantly easier to hit shots rather than trying to hit them with two at once, which will still damage them, but the main thing is, a lot of people assumed that due to the fact that the flintlock does 50 damage, which is half a pirate's health, if you hit somebody with this would one-shot. Well, Rare kind of accounted for that and knew that one-shotting with a pistol that's not terribly inaccurate would be a little bit overpowered, so they made it do around 40 damage each shot instead of 50, which means that it's basically like one sword swipe or like two knife stabs. So you might as well just shoot them twice and hit both shots and be more accurate. Now if you really want to, if you're accurate with it, you can hit two, both of them, try. But the main reason is because this animation is like, if you're in a situation where you have to fight somebody really quick, you'd rather just do this and shoot rather than trying to hold it and wait for the animation to be able to shoot. The few scenarios that this might be good is, let's say you're sailing and all of a sudden you hear a boarder on your right ladder. Well, a lot of people's instincts would be to either have a wonder bomb or just guard the ladder. Now, because I'm using a knife, I can't stab them off the ladder. So, a very easy thing is if you hear someone board, to jump up here, and you can see them, right, of course. You aim at them, and if they're going where you can't hit here, a better place is right here, where you can completely hit them. You can charge here, and then shoot both. Now, they will expect you to reload most of the time, in my experience. They'll expect you to try and reload and shoot them again, which is where you just come up here and stab them a few times if you have your knife, or just swipe them once with the sword if you prefer. In situations like that, it is pretty good to charge. Or, say, you're like me, and you do the crow's nest strategy when somebody's trying to raise their anchor. If somebody was trying to raise anchor after you got it down for your teammate to, start shooting them, if you were to charge it right here, they wouldn't notice you up here most likely, and you would get a pretty easy chance to just shoot them and do a bunch of damage. Now, while that is effective, as soon as you shoot, they will be alerted to your position, and you don't one-shot with that, which is not a good thing, because then you have to hit them with something else. So this should just be used to kind of shoot and pick off people, and then you should use a different weapon, such as the sword, or, even like the sniper or whatever, to finish the fight, right? Now this thing has a lot of different uses. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is the basic stab attack. This attack is almost utterly useless in most scenarios where that player is at full health. Because if they're at full health, This attack does like 10 damage, maybe, so you'd have to hit them 10 times, and any competent pirate would just get stabbed and keep walking forward and just start eating a bunch of food all of a sudden, which would pretty much make them immune to your stabbing, which isn't a very good thing. Now, let's say somebody was coming up my ladder, and I see them, I shoot, hit them, and then once they come up the ladder, instead of reloading, I could swap to my knife real quick, and just poke them twice, which would finish the fight, because this gun does about 80 damage with 2 shots, which means that's 2 stabs, and the stabs are fairly fast, especially if you actually hit the person. The other thing is, a lot of people think this attack is useless, which it can be. This little heavy attack. And it's mainly because the heavy attack doesn't allow you to jump, and you can only walk, which obviously makes it seem useless, but it isn't. The main use for the heavy attack is to chip away at health very easily, but you have to get a surprise attack on somebody, which means you'd either have to sneakily board, or the main scenario I use it is, in the anchor scenario, you wouldn't kill this person if you shot them with this, right? They would know where you are, but you wouldn't have killed them. So the best thing to do is while they're raising the anchor, if you're, say, here, or you can actually survive that fall as well without a broken leg, you would just charge up the attack and drop on them like that if they were like starting to run up, so you would time it right. Or another thing you can do is you can run and while you're in the air start charging it, which means if you're up here, they start to raise anchor. You can run, jump, and then start charging it, so then you can stab them here and poke them twice, and that will kill them usually, like 2 or 3 times. You can also do that from there on the cannons, although I believe if you do it from the very top of the crow's nest on the railing, it will break your leg, which is not a very great thing, because, breaking your leg makes you unable to move. Not a good thing. Now, the main reason I enjoy the knife is because throwing it can be rather fun. Now, you shouldn't just throw it repeatedly over and over, as you'll run out quickly, but say somebody's on your ship and you just shot both your bullets. Now, you probably wouldn't want to reload in this scenario, so you would swap to your throwing knife and just start throwing at them. And a little thing I learned is, unlike the flintlock, the throwing knife, technically you can aim with it. I don't mean like this flintlock, I mean the other one, the single barrel one, where you're kind of just trying to get to the middle of your screen, right? Basically, wherever the tip of your pointer finger is, right there in this scenario, if you throw the knife, it's going to go there. So, obviously you can see my knife went like right there. So we'll aim right at the little skull right there. And, I mean, it would hit there, but the hitbox on the throwing knife isn't the greatest of all time. But it hits basically right at the tip of where that is. That's where the hitbox actually registers the hit anyway. Now, the main thing would be, like, if you shot somebody twice and you're way far away, then you would throwing knife them, because, if you shot somebody up close, you wouldn't want to throwing knife somebody who's up close, there'd be no point. So rather, the throwing knife should be kind of a last resort, or if you're just good at throwing knives. But there are some other really sneaky things you can do with the throwing knife, and one of the really funny ones is, let's say you have your anchor up, and you and your friend are in an hourglass match, right? One thing you can do really quickly, and yes, the knives that are stuck in your ship do stay when you go into another hourglass match. If you just start throwing knives all over your capstan, especially if you have 10 of them from your teammate doing it, if somebody just walks up to your capstan from here, they'll most likely accidentally pick up a knife, as it makes it a little bit harder to lower anchor, which gives you a second. Not that that second entirely matters, but, say they're in a tough situation and you've got them like pinned up here and they start to try and lower anchor and they accidentally grab 2 throwing knives and then they can lower your anchor. That would not be an ideal situation for them to be in any scenario, to accidentally pick up throwing knife instead of lower anchor, which would give you a second to finish that fight very easily. The other thing you can do if you want to be really mean is to prevent boarders, or to try. If you go down to your ladder side, if you have a teammate, it's even better because you can have 5 on each side. You just throw a couple of knives, like a few right here. Now, we cannot see those knives, obviously, but they are there, which means... Can you not, Mr. Shark? Here we go. Now then, say you're trying to board a ship, and they have done this strategy. The first thing you'll most likely see if they're moving is the throwing knife, and you'll hit X or hold it or whatever your button is, and you'll most likely accidentally pick up a throwing knife instead, which is not a very good thing because then you'll pass by, and you'll miss. You can do it there, or if you're really trying to be mean to somebody, if they're pretty good on their cannons, you can throw it on their cannonball barrel. Now, if you're going to do this strategy, you should probably make sure they don't have any cannonballs in the bottom barrel, as they could just go, meh, and open that one instead. But as you can see, there's this one spot right there, which you can open that cannonball barrel, and other than that, there's not really any spot you can open it. Which means in a hurry, if you come over here after cannoning, you're most likely going to accidentally pick up a throwing knife, which means they're off cannons for a tiny bit longer, which gives you a second to keep them off cannons even more by shooting back at them. Now, the throwing knife really isn't all that terribly useful, but from what I've seen, the throwing knife does about 50-ish damage, which means it does the same amount of damage as a flintlock. So if you are pretty accurate with it, you just hit 2 and you can finish somebody off, or you can just shoot them twice. You can shoot them twice with your flintlock and hit them once with it, and that will also kill them. These weapons actually synergize rather well together because they just make it really easy to finish somebody off. Now, when there's 2 people on your boat, that would make it a little bit harder, because these guns have a long-ish reload time. So imagine there's one guy down here, sitting here trying to guard your friend, and your friend's hiding, right? And there's one guy up here aiming at you. And you have your little double-barrel flintlock. Now here, most likely, what you would try and do is shoot the person that you can see, of course. You would shoot either of these people, whichever one you'd like to go for first. Basically, imagine there's a guy there. You could charge your attack, which would give him a free attack to shoot you, but if this guy was aiming at you, you wouldn't want to do that. Instead, you would just shoot him once, he'd probably take cover, and if you can, you'd shoot him twice. Because if you hit them twice, this literally makes them 2 tap to this little poke attack, or 1 tap to that, which is pretty good, considering the throwing knife is actually not as terrible as most people think, because if you look at it, we'll stand right here, right next to this post. And once we throw this knife, right, so we're aiming right here, the drop-off actually isn't terribly bad, considering from right by that post, it came all the way over here, which means it started to probably drop about, right here at that railing. Which, considering the fact that that is, maybe 15 feet, or, 5 meters, if you don't, measure in feet, that's not terribly bad, especially because it's pretty easy just to aim up a little bit if you're really trying to get it further, like that. So, the throwing knife should be more of kind of a last resort kind of thing, or just to finish somebody off real quickly, because these weapons allow you to finish one person off really quickly, more than just attacking several people at the same time, which is more of what double gunning's for. Now, there are a few rather, like I said, mean strategies with the throwing knife. That's one of them. So basically, to recap my little thing here, the poke should be used to finish people off once they've been hit and are really low on health, as this doesn't do much damage. This should be used to get somebody low, because this does 80, 70 damage maybe, right? A heavy attack. But the only problem with the heavy attack is you'd kind of have to sneak up on somebody to actually get it off. But it isn't a bad attack. The throwing knife should be used to finish people off, or just to kill them in general if you're good at aiming it. And the double barrel flintlock can be used to help ladder guard by getting them really low on health, and once they peak you can just stab them twice. Or it can just be used as a weapon to try and defend against people by shooting them. Because, it's pretty accurate, surprisingly. But that still doesn't mean you have to go away from your sniper plunder combo. I just wanted to teach people how to use these, as they can be very lethal if used correctly in combat. As I went from, let's see here, played about 3 hours today maybe, and I went from like 72 to like 80 in Reapers, which isn't terrible. But the other thing that I want to go over, a good weapon, is the Bone Collar. Because I think the Bone Collar is a heavily misunderstood weapon and how it should be used, at least from the people that I've been seeing use it. The Bone Collar is not simply just a shoot this, you're distracted now type of thing. Well, it kinda is. I don't really know how to explain it. The Bone Collar should not be shot out of a cannon, though. And you might wonder the reasoning behind this. And that is because there's nobody to help the skeletons. The skeletons are pretty frail. You just have to hit them a few times and they kind of die. Which means they're not the greatest at just, offense or anything. Now, while it is true, you could throw skeletons on to defend your ship if you really wanted to, they only last 60 seconds, which isn't great. So what you really should use the Bone Collar for is boarding. When boarding an enemy ship, imagine this was an enemy ship and they were sailing forward, a lot of people, if they know, this should be used as a boarding tool, would just throw the Bone Collar, as, that would distract them for a second, which is true, but skeletons notoriously don't do all that much damage. So instead what you should do is, as you're coming up on the ship, throw a couple of blunder bombs on it to try and get anybody low on it, and then throw your Bone Collar. Because then, after you throw the Bone Collar, the people are already low, which means skeletons can finish them off, which would give you the chance to then board. And if you have a little pesky pirate sitting here aiming at you, trying to get you off that ladder, they're going to get bombarded by 3 skeletons trying to stab them or shoot them, which is not really a good thing. So it pretty much guarantees a board if you know how to, kind of get up, that is. And if you don't miss. So the Bone Collar should be used for boarding. The throwing knife should be used to finish people off when you throw it. The stab attack should be used to finish people who are already low off. The heavy attack should be for getting people low. And a double barrel pistol can be used for boarding. Or just ship defense and, getting people really low on health. And that is how to use all of the new weapons. Effectively, that is. Also, just a little note here, because I already tried it, if you hit a keg with the throwing knife, it does explode. So, any of you people who wonder, well, why does a throwing knife light a keg? It does. So, that's about all. I don't think I really need to elaborate further on that one. In other words, don't be silly and try and throwing knife a keg on your boat, because it will explode. Other thing the throwing knife can be used for is a lot of people know that if you shoot a harpoon, it retracts, which, is great. A throwing knife can also do that, which means if somebody's trying to harpoon you, or they harpoon your ship, you can just throwing knife it, and it will go away. Well, stop anyway, because if you hit the harpoon, there that is, because, it doesn't really stick up at the top. So, now the really last one, the last tip for the throwing knife, for the really mean strategies, is right here. I think almost everybody and their grandmother at this point knows that if you come over here, you can do this little climb ladder trick, and it can be rather annoying. And a lot of people used to just close the hatch, because this did make it a little bit annoying, because this use hatch thing came out a little bit more. Which did make it more annoying, but that doesn't stop you from doing it if you know, the exact spot for it. But what does stop you from doing it is throwing a couple of throwing knives right here. If you throw literally 3 throwing knives, 4 or 5 if you really want to, this literally makes it impossible for the person to get through there, right? You just throw a few right around here. They can only place the trinket, pick up a throwing knife, and they literally cannot get to that ladder, which is very, very fun. Because I'm sure a lot of you have had a time where you're coming down, and you think the guy goes to the bilge, but instead, he's behind you because he did the little ladder trick, and he's aiming at you like that. So, in other words, this is one of the best weapons in the game, but it's an underrated one. So, I better see more of you using throwing knives out here on the seas, as they can be rather fun to use. If you'd like me to tell you how to use any other weapons, you can leave a comment down below. But without further ado, that will be the end of the video. I'll see you guys on the seas later. But before we go, if you'd leave a like or subscribe, that'd be really nice. My pirate needs some gold to pay his taxes, you know. Paying taxes isn't very cheap these days. Anywho, I'll see you guys on the seas.